Burke's on his feet. He looks up and gives me a grin and says, "Hey dude, you too must be from Marin." Marin County's A-OK, from Tam to Stinson all the way to MA. Fresh organic veggies in the market every day. The Dennis, Dylan, and NW.
Welcome to the RUN TMC Podcast. That is the RUN, the Marin County Podcast, a podcast about basketball based here in Marin County. I'm Duffy Ballard. I am in Marin County right now. I am with my friend and co-host, David Lavin. We are at a place known as The Hub, burgers, beer, salads, and shakes in Red Hill Shopping Center. And we have season 3, episode 26 coming your way.
And this is it.
This is it.
For this season, folks.
Temporarily.
Don't cry. But we're gonna wrap up season 3 with this one, which is a pretty good one to do it with. The second half of our interview with Coach Steve Lavin, which was awesome. We actually started our saga with Steve Lavin. Saga is a bad word. Our journey, our series of conversations and meetings with Steve at the Hub a couple weeks ago. We met here, had a meal, had a drink, had a beer.
We have invested a lot in these 2 episodes.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing how many stories he has, and we haven't even hit all of them. So you'll see we've got another, hour and a half or so today of the interview that we had with him at Brazen Head, which is awesome. But we've already been texting about so many stories that we didn't hit, some things we had to cut out because the audio was bad. So don't be surprised if we have more content with Coach Lavin down the line. Just saying.
Right. Yeah. This is tested my editorial mettle, Dave, but we do have a lot of stories lined up for retelling. So we won't give any hints or clues other than a celebrity who might or may not be related to Kate Hudson.
There may be some celebrity stuff. There was a Woody Allen movie way back in the day. What was it? Zelig, I think, where he intersperses pictures of himself with all these famous things that happen. It's kind of like a Forrest Gump thing, right? I feel like Lav is kind of like Forrest Gump and Zelig. Just the number of people that he's met, the stories he has, being obviously in LA, in New York, and from a basketball perspective in Indiana, he's just met everybody. So it's
maybe he's an alien, or maybe he's from the future.
It's just kind of crazy. Yeah, the Kevin Bacon 6 Degrees of Separation game is fun. He's a good one for us to have. We're connected to everybody in basketball through Lav.
Yeah. So Dave, we had decided we were going to be really quick in the intro and get into part 2, and then we're going to do an outro. So we've done a little bit of banter back and forth. Before we get into part 2 of the interview with Coach Lavin, we do want to make a plug for sponsors for season 4 of the RUN TMC podcast. We do have packages available and on sale until June 15th, and perhaps even beyond then. But if you're interested, hit us up before June 15th at the RUN TMC Podcast at gmail.com, or Dave on Instagram, or now I am on Instagram.
Yeah,
Dave, I've got, almost a dozen followers at this point. Or just click on the link in the show notes. So we also want to thank our current sponsors, including the Hub. We're right here at the Hub, and it's a beautiful, beautiful day in the late afternoon. We have the Social Club with a K, as always, in Sausalito. Batiste Rum. Ask for Batiste Rum wherever you get your rum. And then Encore Custom on the web and on 4th Street. The new Vortex tees. I've been sporting one recently. Great fabric, new color scheme. Good job, Encore.
Good stuff. Appreciate you, Neil. Yeah, thanks to our sponsors. You're keeping us going. It's great. We're having so much fun doing this. 3 seasons in, and we're keeping it going. So, great way to end season 3 with Steve Lavin, the legend, the man himself. And we pick up this conversation where we left off the last episode, which was right about when he was starting to get into his time at UCLA.
Right. Yeah, we're going to replay the first, 15, 20 seconds that were at the end of the last episode. We're going to replay them. but we're talking about, in particular, players he coached at UCLA, Earl Watson in particular.
And it was related to when we were discussing Matt Painter, who he coached at Purdue, who has gone on to be a great coach for Purdue. And then that led to Earl Watson, another player who Lav coached at UCLA, who's gone on to a fantastic career as a coach. And that whole topic, I think, is really interesting, just about players who became great coaches.
If you haven't listened to season 3, episode 25, which is part 1 of the interview, I do suggest you go and listen to that first before clicking play on this one.
Good cross promotion, Duff. Nice job.
All right, let's go.
Take it away, Lav. Jumping ahead to UCLA, because I want to get to UCLA. So one of the guys you coached at UCLA was Earl Watson, who also obviously was a great player, had a great NBA career, but also has been a really good coach, right? So was Earl another guy that you could see at that time that he was going to be a coach?
Yeah, both Earl and Rico.
Rico Hines as well. Exactly.
Yeah. Rico, in certain respects, because he was a role player,
right?
And so often the greatest coaches were role players. Now Earl was a role player to begin, and then he was always central to our success as a role player. He, made significant contributions, but as he went through his 4 years, he became the primary go-to. The orchestrator, but could also score late game. Was determining either through a shot or a pass, and then defensively, he was a glove. He was tough. But it wasn't surprising when Earl had the desire to coach, and Rico has just a natural gift for working with people and motivating people and inspiring people, and that's what he did at St. John's Prospect Hall. I found Rico at St. John Prospect Hall because we were recruiting Nate James, who was his teammate, and they were playing for a guy named Stu Vetter, who coached Cameron Dollar.
James went
at
to Drake.
St. John's Prospect Hall. Yeah. And we didn't. Nate James went to Duke. Rico came to UCLA, and he redshirted, so he was around our program. It seemed like for an eternity. That's one of the things that's missing today with the transfer portal. There are no Earl Watsons or Rico Hines. It will never happen again, at least probably in our lifetime. Who knows? Maybe it'll come full circle, in some way down the line. But Rico, whether he was redshirting, whether he was a freshman or in his 5th or 6th year at UCLA, was always playing a central part in the leadership aspect and in putting his arm around guys that were discouraged. He had a sense of otherness that was a gift. And, sometimes you got locker room lawyers, guys that think they invented the game, and he always had a great instinct and an eye for, for what was going on. His intuition, his antennas, as it relates to those aspects, is what really made, Rico unique. He found a way to contribute, to every team, both when he was a player for 5 years, and then also when he worked with me at St. John's for 5 years. And they're totally different. So it's like we're talking about Katie and Knight.
Right.
Earl and Rico have certain aspects, they're like brothers, that are very similar in terms of competitiveness, great teammates, all about winning. But they're also different. Earl's from the Midwest, Kansas City, Kansas. Rico's from Greenville, North Carolina, from the South. But I couldn't be more pleased for their experiences. Earl playing in the league 13 years and coaching in the league with, first in the D League, right, with the Austin Toreros, and then I think it was Utah, Phoenix, Toronto most recently. He was with us at the University of San Diego.
Right.
And then Rico now is with the Philadelphia 76ers, but he had stops with the Kings, the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, he's had a great run.
So proud of those guys.
Did you recruit intentionally that type of player that you knew could be like a glue guy in the locker room or cerebral player? Is that
Definitely.
Yeah.
We had a lot of them we had walk-ons like Bob Myers and Sean Farnham and Jason Flowers, or the guys are going to develop over their 4 or 5 years, like a Billy Knight, Matt Barnes.
Yeah.
And then we also, and Earl Watson, Jason Gapono, but then there were all Ryan Bailey, Toby Bailey's brother, but then we also had guys that you could see very early on they're going to be lottery picks.
Baron Davis.
Jerome Moiso, Baron Davis, right? Like
I mean, you were very much involved in the Baron Davis recruiting, right? I mean, that was you.
The time he was sophomore in high school.
Yeah, and that was a huge get. Everybody wanted him. He was right out of Crossroads.
Kansas, Georgia Tech, Duke.
So how'd you convince him?
Well, L.A., he grew up in Los Angeles. He's also someone that's very entrepreneurial and creative.
Yeah.
And had interest in film. He attended Crossroads,
right,
where Dustin Hoffman's kid was,
right,
and Kate Hudson's, attended there. Was a classmate of Barron's.
Yeah.
Funny recruiting story on that. But so at an early age, he had interest in the entertainment industry, and he loved LA. He was close with Mike Warren and Mike Warren's son, Cash Warren. And through the relationship with Cash,
a Lavin camper.
And Mike was a UCLA player for John Wooden, but played on Hill Street Blues.
Yeah,
was an actor, on entertainment. So I think, our advantage was we were UCLA and we're located in Los Angeles, and he had an interest because of the classmates at Crossroads and beyond basketball, and so it was a good marriage. The tough part is his freshman year he gets injured against Michigan in the NCAA tournament, and then we lose to Kentucky, who went on to win the national title with Tubby Smith. But Barron got hurt in the first 5 minutes of that Michigan game.
Yeah.
We ended up winning, I think, in overtime, but then we faced Kentucky, who was a pretty good team. And so then he misses half of his sophomore year, and he comes back in conference play, but then he's the third pick in the draft. So we really only had him for a year and a half, and if he doesn't have that injury,
which is a lot by today's standards.
Today's standards, like, wow, you had him a long time. Yeah,
exactly. Right.
So Cash Warren, I remember, was a Lavin camper.
Yes.
So was Sean Farnham, by the way. But Cash Warren was a Lavin camper. I remember my wife, Katie, at the time my girlfriend, came to Lavin Camp, and Cash Warren was a senior. I remember Katie saying, like, wow, that's a pretty good-looking kid.
She had an eye for talent.
And then he later on went to either date or marry Jessica Alba, right?
Yeah, played at Yale.
Yeah.
And then married Jessica Alba, who our guys, somehow our players knew Jessica Alba, interesting, because I remember Gene Barnes and TJ Cummings.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. And then Cash obviously came in and closed the deal.
Right.
Like Mariano Rivera.
Exactly.
The closer.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
those guys threw 8 good innings.
Yeah, hence his name, Cash. Right.
Exactly.
Money. Because it's so barren as well that he's the Pied Piper. He was that way in recruiting. That's one of the reasons, we were able to put together number 1 and number 2, or 2, maybe number 1, number 2, and another number 1 rated recruiting class. And Earl plays a part in that. Matt Barnes plays a part in that. Dan Gadzarek. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, but Barron definitely had a larger-than-life charisma about him. And so it made others feel comfortable and welcomed. And, he had Earl spending the night at his house before school even started.
Right.
Coming into their freshman year. And so that was a special run. Each school and each experience in coaching is memorable and treasured, for different reasons.
Yeah.
You're different at 32 years old as the head coach at UCLA than you are at 45 as the head coach at St. John's, and at 60 at the University of San Diego, just like parenting.
Sure.
Right? Or teaching.
Yeah.
You're a different parent with the first child, and you're a different, parent when you become a grandparent. And
well, a couple more UCLA things. So I love the Bob Myers story. This wasn't we didn't prompt you on this, but I just don't, because I remember Bob. I met Bob.
Have you prompted me on anything yet?
No, I haven't talked on anything. I met Bob at Lavin Camp, and we became good buddies just coaching Lavin Camps up in Angwin, you know, complaining about the vegetarian food and the gas that we had. But you play a huge role in the Bob Myers story. He's literally enrolled at UCLA, right?
Yeah, before that, it goes back to I attended a Duke coaching academy with a guy named Jeff Corey. Jeff Corey was the coach at Monte Vista High School.
Right, which is where Bob
And
went.
he had played for Bud Presley, and some people feel he's the toughest player in Menlo history. And Bud Presley was a pretty tough coach. And
Bud Presley was a Lavin Camp speaker, and he was 80 years old.
and a Hall of Fame junior college
And
coach.
I remember him as a kid, he rolled the ball out, and he went and dived on the floor, and we all were looking at each other like, is this guy going to die of a heart attack in front of us? Right. And he was life-changing
Best.
speaker.
Well, and Bud Presley is a whole nother podcast. You know, he also, not only a Hall of Fame junior college coach at Menlo, he coached Jeff Van Gundy. He was brought in as a consultant for the Warriors the year they won it 74-75. And if you talk to Al Attles, rest in peace, you know, Clifford Ray, Rick Terry, those players, the reverence that they had for Bud Presley, and really changing the Warriors' mindset. And Al Attles was already nicknamed the Destroyer from his days as a Philadelphia Warrior, right? So it was a perfect match. Like Presley coming in with the fresh voice, but everything he believed in, Attles believed in, because that's why Al Attles had the success he had as an NBA player and coach. But anyway, and Bud Presley was brought in by Jerry Tarkanian late in his career. He was, worked at UNLV with some of those championship teams. But Jeff Corey is Bob Myers' high school coach.
Okay.
I go to a clinic along with Mike LaGarza. We're 3 days at Duke. Unbelievable experience. Another master class from Coach K and his staff. This would have been maybe 1991, 92, somewhere in there. Later, Jeff Corey calls me and said, hey, 3 years later maybe, or whatever. No, it's probably right around that time, because Bob came to UCLA probably in the early 90s, because he finished in 96. So it's right in that wheelhouse. And he says, I got this kid named Bob Myers who held his own against Mark Mattson.
Yeah.
And he's already admitted to UCLA. He's going down there with his father for, some kind of orientation. Can you meet with them, And so I met his father, who attended Purdue University. So we had a 6-degree,
So the Purdue
element
connection.
that weren't played through Purdue. We saw the Purdue stuff in my office. And that leads to Bob, getting a tryout. And he really didn't think he was going to have an opportunity to
Did he want to
team.
row? Like he wanted,
He wanted to stay in shape. Was going to join a frat.
Yeah.
Want to stay in shape. And so he asked me, where's the crew coach?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not sure, to be honest. I said, you can figure that out later. We're talking basketball, And he played well in the open walk-on tryouts, made the team, ended up getting thrown into some games where he performed well. He got an internship with my agent, Arn Tellem. So he was already thinking ahead. And, that's where he met Jerry West. And became familiar. Sonny Vaccaro, Arn Tellem and Sonny Vaccaro very close. And so he was out in front, kind of flying a jet, seeing the big picture, and transitions well into being an agent, and then with the Warriors, and now doing a number of things. He's, I think, a board member in the UC Regents and broadcasting. And that's what's fun about, seeing what Matt Barnes is doing now. What are they doing, 20 years later, 30 years later? What's Matt Painter doing now? Oh, yeah, doing pretty well. And there's a whole bunch of Purdue guys that are doing really well. They don't have the profile in that.
Totally. Right. Well, Matt Barnes has a podcast that's only slightly more popular than ours.
A little bit more smoke.
All the smoke.
Yeah.
Okay, Coach, give us. So you're Jim Herrick's assistant at UCLA for a couple years. You guys won the national title in '95. Incredible team. I was with you the whole way. Ed O'Bannon, Toby Bailey.
Tyus Edney. Amendola, Charles O'Bannon.
Tyus Edney hits the incredible shot against Missouri, right? Was that the Elite Eight, Sweet 16?
No, it was actually the second round against Missouri. And
coast to coast.
Yeah, we would have been fired the next day if he doesn't make that shot, which later we found out. So we had lost the prior year to Tulsa in the first round. So there was a lot of pressure. And now you're the number one
Welcome to UCLA.
seed of the number ones.
Yeah.
And so, but Tyus is mad dash 4.6 or 4.8 seconds.
Yeah. That's a great YouTube.
Can you remember your mind in those 5 seconds or so? Like you're like,
Yeah, and also you remember that whole season was memorable because O'Bannon, Zedek, and Tyus were remarkable leaders. And
George
again, we'll
Zedek.
never see that again
Yep.
in college basketball. Guys that came in together. George Zedek was from the Czech Republic, ended up getting drafted by Charlotte. Ed, obviously National Player of the Year. And Tyus, the best point guard in the country. And those three were so determined because of losing to Tulsa the prior year. The championship really began, that championship run began the day after the loss to Tulsa in the previous season because of their, focus and sense of purpose and just their will to win a national title.
Yeah.
And it was obviously Coach Herrick was on point, the pinnacle of his career, National Coach of the Year, pushed all the right buttons. It was his masterpiece. Everyone looking back, I'm sure Bill Walsh feels that way, or any coach that's had a Hall of Fame career probably has their year where they painted a masterpiece. It all comes together, and that was Jim Herrick's masterpiece.
was there a confidence though in that last 5 seconds among the players and the staff that we're going to win this game some way or another?
Well, a couple things that are interesting. Good question. I mean, we had confidence. But one of our challenges was a little like the Drake Pirates thing we talked about earlier. We had dominated the competition for the majority of the season.
Didn't play that many
There were
close
very
games.
few close games.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so now you're in a close game like
Yeah.
that, and it's the second round of the tournament. And naturally, in Boise, everyone's pulling for the underdog, the Missouri Tigers. But it was new territory. And naturally, there's the potential doubts that are coming in because of the prior year in Tulsa and that disappointment. So you're fighting on a psychological front. And I remember the timeout like it was yesterday in terms of, Coach Herrick's confidence. And not only what he drew up, but then as the team is breaking to go back on the court, he grabbed Tyus and pulled him back in, got in his ear, and said, "Shoot the ball." So I was like, wow, And the reason he said that was maybe 3 years prior against the Fab Five in a second round game in Tucson, Arizona, Tyus had a drive, and he ended up passing it off to Ed O'Bannon, and I think it was Jimmy King or someone came in from behind and tapped it away, and the game was into overtime, and we lose in overtime in the Fab Five. If Tyus had shot it, either A, it's probably going in, or Ed was in position to tip it in on a miss.
Right.
And that informed both Tyus and Coach Herrick for now this moment a couple years later.
You're the guy.
And so now Tyus, catches the ball with momentum going down court, because that was key. And he got the ball with an angle going down court, and he's dribbling with his left hand. And two Missouri defenders come at him, and he goes behind the back at full speed with his left hand, throws it out in front. And now it's just him in the end zone, him in the basket with one defender.
It's a great finish, though.
Yeah, I think Ed O'Bannon's on the baseline.
Yeah.
And naturally, they don't want to foul, right? They've got a 1 point lead.
Yeah.
And so he goes straight up, doesn't leave his feet. And Tyus said, just get it over a fully extended, player. And
one of the great, so everybody, YouTube Tyus Edney, Missouri. It's an incredible play. I remember watching you on the sidelines. That was so fun. Look at this. I have in my notes, we need Lav to give us his Herrick impression. Okay. And he just sort of did it, but all right, give us another favorite Jim Herrick story or impression or whatever.
There are only 4 ways to respond to how are you doing. Fantastic, wonderful, spectacular, terrific.
I remember you telling a story one time where you had an idea in a coach's meeting. He's like, well, that's a great idea, Steve. When you're a head coach, you can go ahead and do that or something like that.
He was wonderful at that. He really encouraged collaboration. He allowed his assistant coaches to participate, as Coach Katie did. I was fortunate to work for two guys, 3 years at Purdue with Coach Katie, 5 with Coach Herrick at UCLA. And they wanted the assistant coaches to recruit, to get involved in the scouting, the game preparation, every aspect. Talk to the media, go to booster.
So learn the
engagements.
whole gamut.
So you're more prepared when you do become a head coach. Brad Holland, Tony Fuller, Greg White, Mark Gottfried, Lorenzo Romar. It was a really close-knit staff, that national championship staff, naturally in particular, that bonds you when you go through an experience like that together. So, but Jim Herrick, he had a feel in terms of how to put players offensively in position where they could thrive. I mean, he was John Wooden template, but he made his own modifications and had a feel within it. I mean, Morningside High School had terrific success. He had studied Coach Wooden because obviously he's in Los Angeles, gone to practices, clinics.
And he was at Pepperdine before?
Yeah. Then from Morningside, he goes to Utah State, works for a guy named Dutch Belknap. Then he's UCLA as an assistant under Gary Cunningham. For 2 years. Then he goes to Pepperdine, has a terrific run there. Then he comes back to UCLA and has that 8-year run, which, will never likely ever be seen again.
And gets fired for what today seems laughable.
Yeah, an expense report from Monty's, which was in Westwood, a UCLA haunt and a hangout for a lot of people that lived in that area.
It was a
West Side.
dinner with recruits.
Excellent steak, the Collins twins, Earl Watson. Coach Herrick should be in the UCLA Hall of Fame. That needs to happen sooner than later. So, and, when you consider what he did, I think it was 3 or 4 conference titles, a national title, the Elite 8, Sweet 16s. I mean, 8 straight 20-plus win seasons, 8 NCAA tournaments.
And what a great, so in addition to you on that coaching staff for that 95 title team, Lorenzo Romar, who obviously a great player himself and went on, has had a great career as a coach. Mark Gottfried, fantastic coach, right? I mean, you guys had a great coaching staff. But so you get the battlefield promotion, you become head coach at UCLA. How old are you?
I was 32 years old.
32.
Yeah.
And Steve, sorry to bring it up, but we got to bring it up. Maples Massacre.
Yeah, first year.
I was there.
Who created that moniker?
You did?
Yes.
You're a visionary.
The author.
So UCLA plays Stanford. I'm telling all my friends, hey, I'm friends with Steve Lavin. Let's go watch the game. We go, we sit courtside, and Stanford beats you guys.
It's by the homecoming.
Who's on Stanford that year?
So what year was that? It was Brevin Knight, right? Or no, was it? Yeah, well, Brevin Knight, Deion Cross, Tim Young.
A good team.
A good team.
A very good. Yeah, good. One of the.
Oh, definitely.
Because that would have been 96, 97?
Yeah, 96, 97. It's funny. It's such a blur, right? 38.
Tim Young was our center.
It's a lot of things get lost over those 38 years. But I remember.
I think we were up 22-2.
Sounds right. That might have been Earl's senior year. We were down 20.
You guys were not
playing
playing
well. We
well.
were down 22-2 when they were number 1 in the country and came back and won.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that might have been Earl's senior year.
Anyway, Stanford beat you guys by a lot. You deemed it the Maples Massacre.
Yes.
But then you go on to have a great season that year. I mean, you guys. I think,
it was the pivot, like that loss.
So how do you recover from that?
The next day you flush it.
Okay.
Like, we didn't watch any film.
Yeah.
We knew that wasn't us, and we had to get ready, put all our energies, because less than 48 hours later, we got to go to the Cow Palace and play a Sweet 16 team in the Cal Bears.
Right.
With Grigsby,
Right.
and Yogi Stewart.
Totally.
Randy Duck, Ben Braun's first year at Cal.
Yes.
And I think they were renovating the Haas Pavilion.
Yes.
And so the games at Cow Palace, which I loved, that's where my dad played in the 1940s,
Of course.
and early 50s when he was at the University of San Francisco. So it was fun for him. Dan Belomini and Barry Tompkins are calling the game, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
for ABC. And it was a hard-fought game. And we win that game to get the road trip split. We go home and sweep the Arizonas, and then win the conference going away by 3 games.
And Arizona was good that year.
They were good, yep. And Stanford was good.
Yeah.
And we beat Stanford by 30 or something at our place.
Right.
Payback game.
Yeah.
But yeah, we, like, that game to us was kind of a defining pivot and turning point.
great.
Of course, we were still trying to get a feel. Like, I was learning on the fly, and I'm an intern coach. So you're working while there's a national search, and they're probably going to bring in Tubby Smith or Calipari or
Right.
Rick Majerus or Rick Pitino or
Right.
whoever the hottest coach in the country is, Krzyzewski. Someone else is coming in to become that head coach.
Yeah.
I was fortunate because of the tie to Coach Wooden from Purdue, who I met through Coach Katie, to get the nod. Because Chuck Young, our chancellor, Pete Blackman, our vice chancellor, Jim Milhorn, our number 2,
Yeah.
all, were very close to Coach Wooden. And 2 of them played for Coach Wooden. Pete Blackman and Jim Milhorn played for Wooden. And so the Purdue Big Ten alignment and the relationship with Coach Wooden from the Purdue days that carried over the UCLA days, and then we had to catch fire. We were first place in February. It was after we beat Stanford, back to the pivotal element to that, because it was like an 88-point turnaround from losing a game by 50 to winning by 30 or something. And I guess in the chancellor's eyes, that was the time to do it.
So
to lift the intern tag.
for us Marin folk, one thing that was really fun about that team was you got the head coaching job, and your assistant coaches are Jim Saya, Steve Spencer. Was Sandel on your staff at that time? Pat Sandel?
No. Sandel was probably Northern Arizona or Pittsburgh.
Okay, but you brought him on. You brought him on later.
So he came on maybe 5 years later.
Right. So you had these great coaches, but they were
Michael Holton,
Yep.
Jimmy Saya,
Drake, Steve Spencer, Drake.
Steve Spencer.
Yeah. But
Later, Gerald Mackins comes on board.
Right.
Later, Coach Sandel comes on board. Yeah, it was a magical run.
that must have been so fun for you. So one thing that I heard Herrick one time talk about, or maybe you were interviewed about this, but Herrick was asked about the difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach, and his answer was one word: lonely. That being a head coach is a lonely job.
Yeah, Coach Herrick had a lot of great ones. He also had
because it's you.
Basketball not only builds character, it reveals it. And that's no doubt facts, truth.
True.
It's a great day to be alive, considering the alternative.
So how did you like being a head coach versus being an assistant coach?
Just so different. In other words, you're grateful that you have the opportunity to coach at the highest level at UCLA under those championship banners with Coach Wooden sitting right behind the bench.
Yeah.
Get goosebumps, going over, shake his hand before every game or give him the nod, after the national anthem.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're learning on the fly, because you don't know what you don't know. So you're grateful that you've got experienced players around you that you already have a built-in relationship with. So you're on this journey together.
Right.
And, it's dramatically different. Like, as an assistant, I didn't perspire. As a head coach, my first couple of years, I was drenched.
Yeah.
It was like I got hit by water balloons from the upper deck,
Yeah.
like I just jumped in the pool and fogged out,
Right.
So that your vital signs, when you go up into space as an astronaut for the first time, or the first time a race car driver's in the Indy 500 or the Kentucky Derby, it's the same, or the first, mission if you're a Navy SEAL, your vital signs ratchet up. And, it's different. You're seeing things and they're coming at you faster because you're not just making suggestions as you do as an assistant.
You're making decisions.
Now you're making decisions that have consequences, and you're going to be responsible for the outcome. Coach Herrick was great at that as well. Sometimes the assistant would say, Coach, we got to get him out of there, or we got to get someone in. And he'd say, for who? Or he'd say, who's he going in for? Or he'd say, who's coming out? And which, sometimes you haven't thought that out, or he's thinking that. Right. If we put someone in, it means I got to take someone out. And all 5 guys are NBA players. Right. You're asking me to take an NBA player, an NBA player out of the game. Yeah. Who's going in for him? I kind of like these 5 out here. He really, sometimes, we might say, hey, Don's really tired, Don McClain. Yeah. He'd say, that's okay. I'd rather have a tired Don McClain than anything over here to my right on the bench. So I'll take my chances. Tyus isn't coming out. Yeah, he's brilliant.
That is so great.
Did you carry over a lot of what he did when you became head coach?
Definitely.
Schemes, yeah.
Definitely. He knew the high post offense backwards and forwards, because that was something he ran his entire career. I come from more of a flex offense, motion offense with some quick hitters, occasional sets at Purdue that Coach Katie ran, but I'd also studied under Knight and Krzyzewski, who were motion offense guys. So, we adapted to the personnel and also to the fact that I didn't know the UCLA high post offense backwards and forwards. The intuitive element, obviously Phil Jackson didn't know the triangle the way Tex Winters did.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's important that you kind of, understand that and then figure out what is going to be best for this group with me as the head coach.
Right.
And so we struggled early. I think we were 6-5 to begin the season. And remember, we struggled to get by St. Louis, Charlie Spoonhour's Billikens on the road. And that was after we had played Lon Kruger's team in the United Center in Chicago.
Illinois.
We lost to Illinois.
Yeah.
And Cameron Dollar knocked on my hotel room door late at night and came in and said, Coach, can we talk? I said, sure. He goes, bring me off the bench. He goes, I can help this team more coming off the bench. We're struggling to score. He goes, let me be a spark. And that meant Chris Johnson, who was a prolific scorer, would move into the starting lineup. And we'd have to kind of play point guard by committee. And that was the pivot from that point on. Later, Cameron was put back in the starting lineup. He wasn't playing with a lot of confidence. Our team was struggling. He had the foresight, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's a Matt Payne or a Rico Hines, there are certain players that
became a coach,
are going to become great coaches. Coach Wood talked about it with Denny Crum. That he was always asking questions as a player, and then even as an assistant, he had a lot of creative ideas. And that's why eventually it's important where you gotta fly that jet. It's one thing to be in a simulator, one thing to be a right hand, a co-pilot. It's another to be up in the sky getting shot at as a head coach or as a pilot, especially if you're a fighter pilot. So, but that was another. When you look back on that season, Cameron having the foresight to know that he'd be better coming off the bench, and our group would be better at that intersection. Later, he comes on and was playing better than any point guard in the country and leading us to the league title and the Elite Eight. Hit the buzzer shot against Iowa State. Cato.
Didn't he he played a big role in the national championship game? Somebody was hurt, right?
Tyus Edney gets hurt.
Tyus got hurt and Cameron started.
Cameron led it home. And Tyus and Cameron at different points have started together that season in the championship team.
Right.
So Cameron, as a sophomore, had some experience in directing the attack, orchestrating things. But to do it against a defending national champion in a game of that magnitude in the Kingdome of Seattle makes it even more.
See, more impressively, Cameron lit me up in the pickup games at Lavin Camps. And so for him to score on a caliber of player like me,
that says a lot.
Truly impressive.
He was a glove, too.
God, I hated playing against that guy.
He had the
thank you
quickest
for that,
hands.
by the way. You at Lavin Camps, you bring these guys, Toby Bailey, J.R. Henderson, like, hey, let's play pickup. Like, oh, fuck, great. That wasn't fun, Duffy.
No, it was special. Up there on the hill in Angwin, right? It had almost this aura, right? Because it was Angwin, this remote spot, but still wine country. And even, the giant, like, aircraft carrier size.
So the gym was
right?
The gym was essentially an old aircraft carrier, and it had 3 full court gyms in it.
Actually, what's not aircraft carrier? Like a hangar. Is that what they call them? Where they put the
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, a hangar. It was a massive building. So actually, that's a good segue. Let's talk about Lavin Camp. So Lavin Camps were just incredible. When you think about the coaches, so this was a sleepaway basketball camp during the summers. I went there as a player for many years. I coached it with you. The coaches who would come to that camp. So we already talked about how I beat Mike Budenholzer, but Alan Major, a guy who you knew from Purdue, went on to have a long and still
was on my staff at USD this year.
Division I coach. I love Alan Major so much. He was at Xavier with that Mata. He's been at tons of places. The UOP.
Leader in the rising coaches.
Exactly. He's coached a national team in Africa. He's amazing. Andrew Jones, Sac City coach. Great coach. Mike Dunlap. Incredible.
Mike
Lagarza.
Randy Fun.
I mean, the names.
Hank Egan.
Yeah. I mean, just incredible. But then you would have guest speakers come, like Tate's Locke, Bob Knight's assistant, or Bud Presley, or Tim.
Tate's worked the whole week with Thad Mata.
Yeah, which was incredible. But I remember Tim Gergovich, who was Jerry Tarkanian's assistant at UNLV, and then later an assistant coach for the Sonics. And so what would happen is, it's a sleepaway camp. First of all, we'd be up at 5 a.m.
Early birds,
which I'm going to get to. And then we
can't hoot with the owls if you expect to soar with the eagles.
told you the Jim Herrick.
The
Jim Herrick ones are
Boy,
amazing.
is that ever true.
Just joined us for this interview.
But we would play basketball all day and then go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning. But then late at night, when the kids would go to sleep in the dorms, the coaches would get together and we'd sit. And I remember sitting in
talks.
And we have these chalk talks. So we'd sit in a dorm room in Pacific Union College in the middle of Angwin. And Tim Gergovich is sitting there, and I'm, 19 years old, and he's telling stories about how, well, we got Gary Payton and we got Sean Kemp. He's telling stories about the Sonics, and so we go a couple of possessions to Sean because Sean's got a good matchup. But now Gary's uninterested, so now we got to post Gary up, and I'm sitting there looking around like, am I really here right now?
And all the Vegas stories.
All the Vegas stories. So give me some of your favorite Lavin Camp memories.
I mean, it's so difficult. Similar to some other things we've talked about, like a certain game in high school. For me, maybe because I'm at that stage of my life, there's different stages and ages, and now it's going on 51 years in this love affair with basketball, and 38 years associated with college basketball, either as a broadcaster or coach. And so I think your perspective is informed and your sensibilities are changed as these decades go by. And so I look at these different intersections or junctures or chapters, right, in the career, and there are more feelings, right, nostalgia. And to me, Lavin Camp was a think tank for coaches, sharing ideas and being able to practice your teaching and coaching methods, in front of young people and impart and share wisdom with them. And in turn, create great experiences for them, but also sharpen your own abilities in a career, in a profession that you're in, which was teaching and coaching. So, but there were just those late nights, Hank Egan talking on motion offense, right? And, Bud Presley's, presence, his aura, right? Gerd, Randy Fun, Pete Newell, John Wooden, Jim Katie. I mean, you think all those players, right, that came through. So to be able to create this space for people from Northern California and there were some that came from around the world.
Totally.
And throughout the country. But primarily, it was kind of a Northern California gathering on an annual basis, right? But day camps were special, too. We had some in, Danville, Pleasanton area.
Oh, you had. So I remember this.
But the overnight camps took on a whole different energy.
You had Chip England. Remember Chip England?
Absolutely. Teaching shooting.
We were at Pleasanton.
Herb Livesey?
Yes. We were at Pleasanton Middle School, and Chip England was teaching a shooting clinic. This was, the parents, fourth graders are sitting there. Parents spent $300 to send their kids. This guy was the shooting coach for NBA teams.
Oh, still is, yeah.
I mean, he's was one of the best shooting coaches in the world, and he's teaching a shooting clinic.
He played, I think, right before Krzyzewski and with Krzyzewski.
Yes.
He's one of those rare guys that played for the prior coach.
Yeah, it was
Bill Foster. Bill Foster left Duke after a Final Four team, went to Northwestern.
Right.
And then Coach K came in.
Yeah, that's right. Chip was a Duke.
Coach K had been in the Army and had some struggles, and people couldn't pronounce his game. And thank God there was a guy named Tom Butters, who's the athletic director at Duke, who stayed with him.
Yeah.
And then Coach K becomes who he is, an icon. But if it wasn't for the athletic director to stay with him, he was on the brink of getting fired. In this era, Coach K would have been fired. In this era, John Wooden would have been fired.
Right.
John Wooden, it was 15 years before he won his first championship. Then he won 10 out of 12.
Yeah, it's
seven in a row, right?
It's a different world.
Before the portal, before the compensating athletes, different area.
I got one thing on Lavin Camp.
Yeah.
I remember from my time there that it's early in the morning, the campers are arriving, energy maybe a little low, a little tired, and you would come out and you'd get everyone in a stance. Can you talk through, you would just bring the energy up in the gym just like that?
Yeah, the stance, in my experience, comes from Pete Newell's hands up drill, where he'd have his teams at USF and Cal keep their hands up and slide for 20 minutes because
the King's drill.
His theory was, hey, half the game is defense, half is offense, and sometimes even more if you're controlling the tempo and whatnot, more or less. And then Gene Katie was a stance, Bud Presley was a stance guy, Mike Krzyzewski was a stance guy. I mean, so that was something naturally as a young coach that, made a big impression on me, that this one constant, Gerg, Tark, Krzyzewski, Katie, Bud Presley, all these guys were talking about stance and really refining stance and the footwork, almost like choreography or dance, but on the court in terms of the technique of the run, glide, run out of your stance, and sprinting back in front of the ball to get back in your stance. And then to me, it was inner and outer stance. There's that mindset, which is a certain stance or a perspective of the mind, a stance that you take in life, a stance that you take on the court, a readiness. And so that became kind of a Lavin Camp, mantra, and it was part of our logo, right? Attitude and stance, part of it. The two things, I run into people through the country, through my travels that were Lavin campers. They're like, attitude! Or they're like, stance.
Don't forget tough, smart, unselfish.
Because we woke up, tough, smart, unselfish came from Don Johnson. That was the John Moore influence we haven't talked about.
We're going to get to John Moore. I got him in my notes.
But Don Johnson, who played at UCLA, was Coach Wooden's first All-American, I think in 1950. And another junior college Hall of Fame coach, and another coach I visited, that didn't have maybe the profile of Knight, Cayley, or Krzyzewski or Tarkanian, but was as impressive a teacher as there was in the game offensively and in his unique motivational style. Don Johnson used to write letters to his players throughout the season. He would correspond through handwritten notes and letters that told a story, kind of like journaling, but for the entire team and their experience. He was kind of like early Phil Jackson, but without knowing it, in terms of the Zen aspect of the game, and had a big influence on John Moore, as did Chet Kammer. He coached at Westmont when John was playing there. His brother Mike played at Westmont, and Chet and his son Chad are with the Miami Heat, with Spoelstra. There's all these 6 degrees. Randy Funn was an assistant at Westmont College. John played at Westmont, later became the head coach for 27 years at Westmont. John's brother, Mike Moore, played at Westmont. My sister married John Moore.
A romance blossomed at the Lavin Camp.
That's true. John Moore worked the Lavin Camp.
Yes.
Met Rachel on Sunday when the kids check in.
Yep.
And then she drove him to the airport on Friday when the camp was over. And there might have been a little kiss on the cheek.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if John leaned in or Rachel did. There's some conflicting stories there.
Okay.
Things get lost in terms of the accuracy.
It's worked out.
No one will know. But yeah, two wonderful nieces that I have as a result of John and Rachel, 13 and Jackie, who both live in New York.
Well, my lasting memory of Lavin Camp, and then we'll close the loop, because, I mean, we could talk forever about Lavin Camp. It was amazing. But the early bird, so the camp would start at, 7 a.m., whatever. But there was the optional early bird. So if the campers who wanted to could get up at 5 in the morning and go down to the gym and get some extra work in.
Yeah.
And I remember going to early birds as a camper.
And somewhere on the outdoor courts where there was that fog that you get in the wine country.
The mist.
It made it almost like Beauty and the Beast, the original Beauty and the Beast.
Totally.
Cocteau.
Or the Thriller video, whatever you want to choose.
True.
So the campus, though, was very spread out and hilly. So the dorms are up the hill, the gym is down the hill. So you have this long walk through, it was like the Baton Death March through the fog to get down to the gym. I remember walking into that gym at 5:30 in the morning, and you and Mike Delosio are there, and Delosio is dripping in sweat. And it was 5:30, and he had clearly been, you guys had been there for a while.
Yeah, we used to run the hill, too, up to Angwin and Pacific Union College, because I was training for marathons at that point.
That's right.
But, yeah.
I dropped you off one time. Do you remember that?
Wow.
I drove you out there like 20-something
to the
miles.
bottom?
And in your car,
Wow.
dropped you off, and I drove your car back.
That's amazing.
You were an Uber driver before it was cool.
He's gonna be crazy. It was early morning. It was already hot.
But that's like all the clinics you could do, all the teaching you could do. That was as a kid seeing that, like, okay, here's a guy who's been up. He must have gotten up at 4, and he's getting that extra work in. This is what passion is. This is what it takes. Like, that said so much more to me than any clinic. That stayed with me.
Yeah. We also, I appreciate that perspective and those kind remarks. We also did things, I think, in the packet and in the evaluation.
Still have it.
And even the stations where maybe we'd rotate. There was clinics going on upstairs, or maybe the game started and teams that weren't playing were downstairs in a classroom. And then we also had the theater where maybe we were watching NCAA tournament replays. And so part of it was, as the camp grew to 300, started with 17 girls, I think, on the outdoor court in Kentfield.
Yes. At Ross
College,
School.
Marin. Ross School might have been the first, then Kent near Half Day Cafe and restaurant we've been at recently. So, but also you get creative when you've got the logistical challenge of having that many people, at an overnight camp, and how do you keep them engaged, captivated, and maximize their learning experience. And so, like a lesson plan for a teacher, but in a basketball setting, it really forced important qualities like ingenuity or resourcefulness.
Okay, talk about the rookie dance.
Rookie dance came from San Francisco State. Coach named Kevin Wilson, Coach Samuel and I both played for. Pat Fiscaldo, who had a great run at Sonoma State, was an assistant coach on that staff at San Francisco State. And Coach Wilson had a tradition that all the freshmen, the rookies to the program, had to dance in front of the veteran players. And it was kind of a rite of passage, earning your stripes.
Gentle hazing.
And naturally also taking off your cool jacket.
Exactly.
And until he'd blow the whistle, point at you, and you had to get in the middle, the circle, and dance in front of your teammates. And he wouldn't let you out until you really cut the rug, unless you really put some moves.
You really bought in.
Yeah. No. And so we created that same tradition at the Lavin Camp, and it became a favorite.
Wonderful and terrifying.
Right.
And then how about let's throw
And
you.
coaches had to do as well.
Oh, absolutely. I did.
We
it
had
a
some
couple
guys
times.
boycott. You had to send a couple coaches back to Fresno, I believe.
I
Didn't
hope
want
there's not video. of
didn't
Dave
want to
doing it.
participate.
Oh, I do it willingly. I did it even when I was not a rookie. Okay, how about Yakino?
Yakino was a close friend of my sister Rachel. I think they'd worked in the restaurant business back in the 70s. And he
Magician.
also was a magician. And he could eat fire. And that was really his gift. And he had
These are the things I remember from the Lavin
he
Camp.
had like a Raleigh Fingers, legendary
Mustache.
mustache.
Yes.
And you could see it, at times catch fire or be crackling when you hear the noise, which even added to the whole effect and the magic of
Amazing.
Yakino. And of course, the crowd in that theater, would be chanting "Yak, Yak, Yak" for Yakino
I remember it well.
to get him fired up.
Okay, Lav. We got to hit on a couple more things. Let's hit on St. John's. So you go from, and we're going to get to broadcasting after St. John's, but St. John's, so you spend this time at Purdue, you're at UCLA, these just like iconic programs in iconic parts of the world that celebrate basketball. Indiana, Southern California, LA.
There is a theme here, right?
But now you
Great
go to
Pirates.
I mean, absolutely. But now you go to St. John's, man. You're playing at Madison Square Garden, kind of the mecca of the world. What was it like coaching at St. John's for you?
To me, it was voltage. When we talk about what you remember most, it's the voltage and energy of that city
Yes.
and Madison Square Garden,
Yeah.
the magic of what happens in a high-level game, against Duke, against UConn,
Being in the Big East.
in the Big East Conference, and Coach Carnesecca,
Yep.
So the history and the tradition. And my dad had played in the old Garden, so I'd heard stories about New York basketball.
Yeah.
My dad was born in New England, in Cambridge. He was in Long Island, came out to San Francisco in the mid-30s with his mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. So he spent the majority of his life here. But to me, it was somehow poetry or another full circle alignment, whatever we want to call it. When that opportunity came along, it was the first job, and there had been others that were presented that were really intriguing that I got farther down, close to the finish line, like North Carolina State.
Oh.
But St. John's was a dead sprint, into the finish line. And all I really needed was just to see the campus. I really accepted the job. I was working at ESPN at the time. When I was done with the Sweet 16 weekend before the Final Four, the following weekend, I went to New York, met with Chris Monash in Tribeca, the steakhouse. I was staying at the Hudson Hotel, Upper West Side. And he offered the job as we were on the way home in a cab. And I said, I'm coming. I just need to see my office. I just want to meet the president. I want to get my bearings, for the campus. I said, but this is not me playing cat and mouse or being cagey. There's something that tells me I need to see the campus first, He later told me that he knew there was a rain forecast with rain, and his concern was he thought, since I've been at Purdue and UCLA, that with the buckets, with leaks in the roof,
Right.
and a gloomy day in Queens, Jamaica, that somehow would change my mind. He didn't understand Drake High School,
Right.
San Francisco State,
Yeah.
Chapman College, a Division II player that traveled in vans up to Humboldt, was a Chico, and that I think sometimes that impression people have of you because they really don't know your origins or your history or upbringing. Your father being an educator for 47 years, and my parents raising 6 children. So I was all in. Like, to me, St. John's was an ideal fit.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't take a job if I didn't think it was an ideal fit.
Did you
Just
find the
different than the others,
Did you find the media scrutiny in New York and LA to be really tough to manage, or were you okay with it?
To me, New York, not so much. Partly because St. John's had struggled for a decade.
Okay, so the expectations weren't as high as at UCLA.
Yeah, they were really, so we, 2 NCAAs, 2 NITs, 3 21 seasons, packing the garden, sending guys to the NBA for the first, all those things were the first in a decade. So just returning them to relevance was the goal. And during that era, a lot happened. That's when I had cancer, so I missed a full season with cancer.
Yes.
That was the one season we didn't go to the postseason. My father died in 2013 on February 10th.
Yeah.
And so that naturally, is the first time where you lose, a loved one.
Yeah.
In my case, later my mother, January 25th, 2018, 5 years apart. But those inform in a profound way. Cancer, losing your dad, then losing your mom, and that plays a part, I think, in the way I looked at the opportunity and the possibilities of San Diego, because it just felt like it was an ideal fit, and grateful that I got to have that run. No bitterness. You say, "Oh, you must be upset." I said, no, it's like I get it. Like this is the business I signed up for 38 years ago.
38 years. You're old hat for you.
We get a new president or 3 new athletic directors. We had 3 athletic directors. So the guy that hired me, Bill McGillis, is a saint and a good friend. And then he was replaced by a former AD at University of San Diego, a guy named Kai Snyder, who was a chancellor, up in the administration when he came down when Bill was moved on from San Diego. And then someone named Kimya Massey they brought in after a national search. So 3 athletic directors in my first 2 years on the job.
Wow.
But that reflects the college athletic
state of the game
of change and turnover. And it's a revolutionary state where everyone's just trying to figure it out as we go. Buckle up, give thanks, and see what happens, and take notes as you go.
Going back to your transition to coming back on at St. John's, you've been in the broadcasting booth for a while. I'm sure you've taken some notes, and now how did you change as a coach, both tactically as well as like your approach to the players or even recruiting? Like what were your changes?
Yeah, really good question. One is the broadcasting run was the equivalent of a sabbatical. It was another master class. There was that master class of going coast to coast as an aspiring coach, spending time with Krzyzewski and Knight and Tarkanian and Gerg and all those other coaches we talked about studying the game. There's your formal basketball education playing the game, for George Lewis and Coach Hayward, Dan Marina, Evan Wilson, and Lyle Damon. Now broadcasting, looking again through a different lens, a different perspective, sitting on the sidelines, going to practices, shoot-arounds, and watching game film and preparation of both teams so that you can be informed and prepared for broadcast and deliver what your viewers deserve. And you're also learning the mechanics of a new career. The broadcast mechanics, the fundamentals of broadcasting. So while that's going on, you also are enhancing your basketball acumen by seeing Lute Olson and Jay Wright and Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski at work, but they're no longer a competitor.
Right. They're more giving, probably.
Yeah, they're opening the doors because they know you're just preparing.
Right.
But there's a respect there because
they know you're
coach.
A coach. Yeah.
So and so it informed in a number of ways because you're watching other programs in terms of practices, the tempo, the rhythm of practices, the choreography of practices, different styles and system of play that you're seeing up close, both in the practice, then a shoot around, and then in a game. When you're in studio, you're watching 12 games at once. And so that's a whole nother kind of informative experience. And just the time with coaches, with assistants and head coaches, whether it's on the phone or, going out to dinner after a game or the night before a game. And so you're bringing all those experiences back to being at St. John's. And I think just openness and being curious, staying interested, and in broadcasting, I was fortunate to work, in studio with the John Saunders, but Brent Busberger, Dave O'Brien, Mark Jones. I mean, there were so many, Tim Brando when I was later at Fox, So no doubt all of these experiences inform the way you look at life and the way you navigate life moving forward. So as do those experiences, like they have nothing to do with basketball.
So you were saying before, you would get butterflies before a game as a broadcaster, right? Like I know as a coach,
They're
you get
different.
nervous, but
They're different. They're
You get
different
nervous.
types of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because in broadcasting, it's live TV, and there's a performance element, and how you articulate and respond in real time to what's going on in the court, right, is critical to your success as a broadcaster. And when you're coaching, there's the articulation aspect, but that's just in the timeout with your team or pregame or halftime or postgame. And it's with the group. It's not to the whole world. It's a very intimate setting.
Yeah.
With
And
your
sometimes
team.
you can just be quiet and that'll be effective, right? Sometimes,
Absolutely.
As a
Where
broadcaster,
TV,
yeah.
if they tee up, you've got to respond, right? Or do pretty awkward, right? You can't pantomime it, right? You got So, and I think one informs the other. Like the broadcasting informed my coaching. The coaching obviously informs your return to broadcasting and bringing the viewers.
Well, there are a number of guys people who have done both, right? Steve Kerr famously was a really good broadcaster, and then went from there being a coach, and he's done pretty well. McGuire, for sure. Give us you told us a story before about Brent Musburger with your notes. I like that story.
Yeah, so we're at Wisconsin. Might have been Wisconsin, Maryland, maybe a preseason game. And Brent says, during the timeout, give me your notes. And the notes are important because they're part of your preparation.
Sure.
And in the event that there's a blowout, I'd like to have some notes because the game is going to be less interesting. And so you might want to talk about, some national topics of interest. You might want to highlight something that's going on out west, which I always like to do, because being from the West Coast, we're trying to give some love to what's happening out here.
Conference of Champions.
So first I thought he was kidding. And he's like, no, give me your notes. And I eventually, because it's Brent Musburger, give him the notes, and we're in the middle of a break. I'm assuming he's going to give those notes back to me when we come back from the commercial.
Yeah.
And so I was like, give me my notes back. He's like, no, we're just going to have a conversation from here on out. He's like, we didn't hire you to be looking at notes. He goes, you're a broadcaster that actually faced Krzyzewski and Roy Williams and Lute Olson and has been in the NCAA tournament and understands implicitly what these teams are going through respectively. So you have to respond in real time to inform our viewers and give them a three-dimensional perspective that you're not going to be able to do if you're looking at your notes. He goes, we have sideline reporters and other people that can read the notes.
Sure.
He goes, but we're here
That's great.
to have a conversation. And that was a transformative moment. And also a consultant that ESPN had hired named Bud Morgan, who was classically trained in theater and was at ESPN and part of the Sports Century and the Classic Sports Channel launch, and worked at a number of networks. And he would basically just mentor broadcasters, everything from voice and inflection to breaking down basically the transcripts, of the broadcast. And sometimes you just read what you had said and then watch it on tape. And so he was another kind of key element. We talk about mentors. When I look back on my life, it's been about older people that have wisdom and life experience are willing to share it.
Yeah.
And so the number of mentors, basketball Buddhas, Miyagis, oracles, whatever we want to, wise old owls, and from grammar school, relationships with the janitor, or because I was on the principal's bench a lot, getting to know all the people that were working in the principal's office. And those relationships were more informative than what I was learning in the classroom at times. Our street cleaners, where I grew up, hanging out with them and being in the truck with them, lunch breaks with our janitors. So and that theme's been consistent. It's always been older people that are willing to help, that have some confidence in you, that see some potential in you, whether it was teachers in the classroom, academic advisors, or my coaches in other sports as a youth, and then obviously basketball when I kind of really went down that path for good. So the graciousness, the generousness, providence comes to mind.
Yeah.
Because there is timing, grace, right? Where you just...
While we're on that
grateful.
topic of older mentors,
Yeah.
you kind of compared similarities and differences between your dad and John Wooden, like two major impacts in your life. And I'm sure, both very wise people, but
Yeah.
they approached it differently in some ways.
Well, both were really interested in ideas. Both were teachers. Both loved basketball. And both were English teachers.
Yeah.
They were wordsmiths. They had a love of language, poetry, etymology, the origins, the history of words. Coach Wooden, late in his life, one of the last visits to his apartment in Encino, he had books everywhere and throughout his apartment, and with note cards, highlighter pens, and he was actually studying all world religions, Hinduism, Judaism, and Catholicism. And because I asked him, what's going on here? He goes, I'm just kind of comparing all these world religions. And it's so clear, that they share more in common than there are than they don't have in common. And there are some certain kind of themes, right, that run through all of them. But because we've been so focused on the differences, it's led to these atrocities and genocide.
Sure.
And our worst, side of our nature, coming out, and so that was, his awareness of mortality, his own mortality, and his faith, and the openness, which I think was one of his gifts, one of my father's gifts. There was a real curiosity. They were interested in ideas, in life, in others, and that sense of otherness they both had. You could feel that aura, and you also could see it in their actions. And both had, this natural kind of gift for teaching and for caring, right? There was a high degree of compassion and empathy that they both possessed. And they hit it off when they spent time together.
Yeah.
And because the references, whether it was the Mills Brothers lyrics, from the 1930s, or poetry or literature. I mean, Coach Wooden late in his life was working on children's books. My father was teaching at San Quentin, with the inmates. That was kind of his social, probably, this side of, he had this, I don't know.
And giving book recommendations to people.
Yeah. Book recommendations to the hospice people that were there in those final days with him. Social work, right? There was an aspect in his teaching, his coaching, and his life where looking out for the underdog, looking out for underserved, right? And Coach Wooden had that as well. Whether it was Special Olympics or so they really raised the bar on otherness, on grace, empathy, compassion, and they both, if you ask them questions, will give you just an answer of what to do, but they have this innate ability to instead tell a story, teach through metaphor, or somehow arrive at a place where you left with what I felt were like tools or instruments to navigate, my journey forward, the equivalent of a flashlight or a compass, instead of saying they thought I should do this when I was at a certain intersection of Should I return to coaching and take this job, or should I continue to stay in broadcasting? So, because they ultimately didn't, number one, they didn't want the responsibility of telling you what to do because it's your life.
Yeah.
And those are things you've got to learn on your own. Those are kind of existential questions. But they would provide assistance in their own way through metaphor, through telling you a book that you should read or a passage, to touch base with.
Amazing.
Well, you talk about, right before we're talking about Wooden and your dad, I mean, you were talking about mentors you've had and people who've kind of paid it forward for you. And I still remember getting letters from you on Purdue letterhead and UCLA letterhead, just saying, keep working, proud of you. Just, you didn't have to do that.
You'll have a podcast someday, Dave. Just
Someday, keep working. Can't shoot, but you'll have a podcast. But
That is an old school value. It's interesting, right?
You had a huge impact on me doing
I appreciate that.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah. Okay, Lav, we're going to shut down Brazen Head. We've been here for hours, but I could talk for more hours. But
Absolutely.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you last thing, and then we'll get to crunch time. Give us your thoughts on the state of the game, in particularly in college, given you 38 years as a lover of, a participant in the game of college basketball. It has changed so much in the last couple of years with NIL, with the transfer portal. Where do you see it going? How do you evaluate it now? What are your thoughts on the game?
Well, I think, big picture, it's important that we remember that change is inevitable in life, right?
Yeah.
And in any industry, we see it on a consistent basis. It's our ability to adapt and change. It's vital. And so we're at another intersection.
Yep.
The Olympics went through it.
Yep.
They adapted in terms of the, amateur element, right, of the Olympics, as other countries are closing the gap on us. And we figured out a way to allow Olympic athletes representing the USA to be compensated. And we in college athletics were slower to get there. And because we didn't have an evolution, eventually there's a revolution. And that, again, taking it to a broader perspective, not saying that college athletics is the equivalent to the French Revolution or civil rights or women's suffrage or other revolutions, but they do inform.
It's a big change.
That if you're not going to evolve, then eventually you'll be forced through a revolution, in this case through the courts. And so it will correct itself. I'm confident. There are too many good people, the Dan Gavitts, the coaches like Krzyzewski and Roy Williams, Jay Wright, the people that still have a voice and a seat at the table, as well as getting student athletes. And naturally, we need the current coaches, the National Association of Basketball Coaches, USA Basketball, the NBA, all of it. International basketball need to have a seat at the table. They all need to be engaged and involved in the conversation as we move forward. It's wild. College athletics right now is going through a wild, wild west equivalent.
Yeah.
But the important elements are still there. And now it's just how do we tinker? How do we adapt? The pendulum has swung in one direction. There's a lot of good things that have come out of that. But now I think there'll be a naturally balancing to this extreme.
Well, it's great perspective. We're excited for whatever's next for you. I know you got a lot of different options out there, as we've talked about.
Hanging out with you guys.
Hanging out with us, more podcasting.
Episode 1 of 8 right now.
That's right. Okay.
We haven't got, do we work Brett Tavani into the mix yet?
Yeah.
Or Paul Faribuff?
I mean,
somebody, Doug Denelland. And
we can talk about all the great Marin.
Chris Fulton might not got enough love, and we got to give Chris a little more love.
Chris?
Good as he was.
Chris texted me early on. He said, just saying my high school record was 94-2.
Wow.
So
that is impressive.
I mean,
He might be, we talk about like Eddie Joe, in my view, is the greatest player in Marin County history.
Yeah.
And part of it was his style for the game, like a Pistol Pete, but Marin County. And, the headband, his whole look,
Style.
his ability to pass. I mean, I don't think Drake becomes Drake without Eddie Joe Chavez.
Yeah.
But Walt Gillespie was a terrific talent as well, ended up playing at Berkeley. And all those great Drake teams, we've talked about, well chronicled, and other terrific players, in the county. But Chris Fulton would be, in that category of a natural, right? I mean, he could shoot the ball from range. He could rifle passes around the court. And, his drives to the basket, he was, his courage too, like in crunch time, he was at his best to take the biggest shots. He was
Confidence.
a lefty.
Yep.
He was unorthodox in certain respects.
He had a little step back dribble, just like Harden. He had a Harden dribble step back well before
All right,
Harden.
And a behind the back.
Yeah.
Lab, our first
behind the back.
crunch time question.
Okay.
Okay.
Down 1, 5 seconds left. Who are you drawing the play up for? This is a Marin only. So I assume you're going to pick a Drake guy.
Yeah, I'm going to go Steve Kellmore.
Okay.
Because he could score with his back to the basket. You could put him out top. He could, you could isolate, flatten, go 1-4. You could also, get him an elbow catch. You could pick him pop.
Okay.
You could pick a short roll. You could pick a long roll with him.
Who's setting the screen? Did go Dan Hunt on the screen?
Probably Hunt, because you get a big switching out to him,
Big
and
little
then he can
switch.
attack those feet.
Yeah.
And, again, he could take smaller players down low and bully ball them, but he could take bigger players off the bounce. And he had a toolbox that was pretty impressive. Left hand, right hand.
Okay.
Used his body well in terms of, protecting the ball, from a defender, and using that body to get angles and finish in the interior, made his free throws. So I'm going to go Steve Kellmore. It's a tough one. You couldn't go wrong. That's why it was a really good team. And if you loaded up on Camelboard, you were going to get burned. So he was often going to be in a favorable matchup. And you had to guard Jimmy, you had to guard Dibley, you had to guard Chris, you had to guard Hunt.
Yeah.
And we had good rebounding, so those guys would clean up the misses.
Favorite gym?
It's Sir Francis Drake High School gym. I mean, let's face it, it was the Boston Garden or the Mac Court if you're an Oregon Ducks.
How about
college
favorite
basketball
gym
fan.
anywhere in the world? Anywhere that is like, well, let's think about like some colleges you've been to, whether as a coach or as a broadcaster.
There's my sentimental. I love UCLA because Coach Wooden was sitting behind those
Pollard
benches.
Pavilion.
Those championship banners are above your head. And it's the standard in college basketball with 11 national titles. Purdue, Mackey Arena, a gladiator kind of environment. And in my view, the loudest when it gets rocking. Something about the dome ceiling and the way it. But the venerable arenas like Allen Fieldhouse, Cameron Indoor Stadium,
Kansas, Duke.
the old Harmon Gym, now Haas Pavilion. Yeah, like those, the Palestra.
Oh, yeah, Philly.
It's partly, the environment like a Wrigley Field or a Fenway Park in baseball, but these are basketball venues where there's an intimacy that you're experiencing. Whether you're broadcasting, officiating, playing, or coaching, you're aware. Madison Square Garden would be up there as well. That was our home court at St. John's.
Of course.
But again, that's more in those larger venues like Pauley or Mackey Arena.
What was the toughest gym to play in as an opposing coach? Like where would you just think, oh shit, this is going to be really tough?
The ones with the greatest players, for sure. So Duke.
Yeah, that'll do it.
When you're facing 5 lottery picks.
Yeah, that's hard.
Or a roster that's 13 NBA players, or 11 or 10. That wherever those players are located, that makes it the most difficult venue.
Good answer.
But I think in terms of a built-in hostile environment, Mac Court
the old Oregon
a miniature, kind of Boston Garden.
It was really steep, and the fans were right on top of you.
Yeah, and whether it was the Dick Harder or Don Munson, it was obviously Ernie Kent's great teams, Dana Altman. Might not have had the opportunity. I think the Matthew Knight Arena was built by the time Dana came along.
Yes.
But that place had the ivy on the, outside of the arena. It almost felt like a haunted house. And then the locker room and the bowels with the sound of the balls bouncing and the fans pouring in, the smell of the popcorn. I mean, there were pipes that, your players would get injured on just entering or exiting that locker room.
It's like Kezar. It's
Showers
like this old, rickety.
The showers were built for basketball players like 5'8".
Right.
It was just an unusual. We'd just go back to our hotel and shower because it was a waste of time trying to get 6'10" guys to shower under that. Cameron Indoor Stadium, Harmon Gym, so Duke, Cal, McCourt, Palestra, those would be right up there in terms of the more intimate. And the history, of those places is special. I love Maples Pavilion. We actually won there 3 consecutive times. Only time in the history of college basketball we knocked off the number 1 team in the country back-to-back years on the roads.
Right.
I think we were number 10 the third year. So they had their way with us in Pauley, interestingly, counterintuitively, but we had our fair share of success in Maples. I love Maples, but it didn't seem to have, it didn't reek.
It's not as, the history is there. It's not as, it's a little bit sterile. Yeah. Okay. You're starting an NBA franchise. You're the owner. Who's your coach?
Right now, I'm going with Jay Wright.
Great answer.
And if it was NBA, probably Spoelstra. So if I'm pulling from the NBA, it's Spoelstra. Yep. If I'm pulling a college coach to the NBA or trying to get a college coach that's sitting it out right now, in Jay's case, to come back, which I don't think he will.
I love Jay Wright. I love Spoelstra too. Spoelstra's one of my favorites.
But either of those coaches, and there's so many good young coaches, these are hard kind of questions to answer. But I think those two good fits in that they bring old school values with the fresh presentation and have the credibility with the current generation. Now, there's an expiration date on all of this. That's just a reality.
Yeah.
And so there's another wave of young coaches that played in the NBA and are going to have that respect to be able to communicate in a manner that will allow them to bring forth the full potential of this generation of players, whether it's individuals or a collective group being a team.
Well, Jay Wright's kind of coaching the New York Knicks right now as we're seeing them make a nice run through the playoffs. Yeah,
and Steve Kerr's had it. Like he's had that run and is as good as any. So he'd be right up there. They haven't played as well the last couple of years, but either has Miami.
Right.
But Steve Kerr comes from a family of educators, and then if you think of who he worked under, played under, like Lute Olson, right? Phil Jackson,
Greg Popovich,
and then even that experience in the front office with Phoenix, and then back to what we talked about, the time in TV,
right,
where you separate yourself some.
Well, then he played with Michael Jordan and Tim Duncan and these incredible leaders and players. Yeah. Kerr's one of one. He's incredible. All right, that's a tough one. Best player you ever coached?
Baron Davis, is by far the most talented.
Yep.
But was only able to coach me a year and a half because of the injury.
Right.
But it was clear from the first time I saw him as a sophomore when he was really built more like a tiny Archibald. He was more of a diminutive. He had a growth spurt and then also developed this strength that turned him into like a fullback, like an Earl Campbell, and as shifty at maneuvering on the court in basketball as any, and with the verts to go to the top of the backboard. And that was with the ACL injury in college, right? So, but, right behind are guys like Jerron Rush, who didn't end up getting drafted.
Great player.
Comes from that family, or Brandon Rush, Kareem Rush, who both did play some in the NBA. But Jerron Rush was the oldest, and I think in some ways he was like that trial balloon. And one of the early in terms of the AAU circuit and the challenges of having so much success early. And now he's doing well, amazing father and husband, and working with kids in Kansas. And I love him. But he was a Walter Davis, like in terms of when I look back on guys that I coached, right? Just Reese Harkless at St. John's. There's was a remarkable talent as well. Then there's like different categories. There are the guys that got the most out of their ability, right? That's where Earl Watson, D'Angelo Harrison, Phil Green, they maximize, which is Coach Wooden's definition of success, is kind of doing the best that you're capable of on a daily basis by making each day your masterpiece and then stacking those masterpiece days. And that's how you create a legacy, a life.
Love it. Favorite restaurant?
Last one, Dave. This is the last one.
Unless you have one.
No, I think this is a good one to end with.
Favorite restaurant?
Yeah, I mean,
let's go Marin and then elsewhere.
I'll give you a couple here. Campagnola's in New York.
Okay.
Is legendary, old school,
Italian,
gangster, Italian,
Right.
as good as it gets. Just a great New York haunt, and the delivery on food is off the chain. Brazen had in San Francisco, again, our personal experience.
Where we're sitting.
Yeah, I mean,
incredible.
Eddie, the owner, family-run business. Dan, the bartender,
Made me a good old
my guy,
fashioned.
loves basketball.
Yep.
The daughters of Eddie, Emma, and Aaron, are now taking on the business as well. So that to me is unique. It's got this speakeasy feels we talked about.
It's great.
And I just love it. It's got a great feel. So I'm gonna go Brazen. But Little Joe's, in the marina, the Dugan family, back to family and tradition. They've got the original Joe's, in different locations. They're expanding. Like I think they're gonna have one in Marin coming up. There's one in Walnut Creek.
Great.
Of course, John Dugan, his father, John Sr., and Brad Dugan in the family as well, right? Was a legendary coach at City College, Hall of Fame, of course, junior college coach in California. So I naturally like when there's a 6 degrees of basketball in some respect.
Awesome. Duff, you got any others?
Any other restaurants? Well, I could. How about
any other
the hub in San Anselmo?
Any other crunch times?
No, I think we've covered a lot, Dave. I think we've.
Do we get Brett Tavani in there?
We didn't cover everything, but we've covered a lot.
Give us your Brett Tavani.
I love Brett Tavani. Love Paul Farabuff. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Brett's one of my heroes.
Well, you told us before that you were maybe going to even transfer to Santa Fe to play for Brett.
Right. He, before the transfer portal, he was doing some recruiting. Because I played for him.
It's like, you'll get more shots for us.
Yeah, more shots, freedom, green light. He builds your confidence. And I gave it some consideration, but he also respected and understood staying loyal. My dad teaching at Drake, too, with a bad look. But, he's coached at Branson, coached at Dominican, right?
Coached at Drake.
Coached at Drake, coached at San Rafael. I mean, this guy has had these third and fourth acts, in Northern California coaching, influenced the people like Mike Pravelli and Dave Deneen and Joe Ford and Pat Sandel, who's an assistant to the Bulldogs. So
we had Brett on the podcast, and I think this is right. I think he coached in 6 decades.
Yeah, loves his players. Players love him. Yeah. He also had a balance, like a little bit of the Pete Carroll, I think, because he loved nature and hiking, and his vitality and energy and enthusiasm was a big attribute of his. I mean, he knew basketball backwards and forwards, creative things offensively and with the full court press, and tough teams defensively. And he was also coaching at Santa Fe in a time where Drake was on their run, because let's face it, he's winning those championships, the majority of them, right? If Drake didn't become what it is. But humility is there as well with him in terms of coming to the Drake camps and openness, and also lab camps. So I just got a lot of love for him. And Paul Farabuff, another one, love of literature, an English teacher, a writer, and his intellect, right? I mean, those two guys, Farabuff and Devani, had a big influence on me. The high-profile guys naturally, when you're coaching, get this love. It's like, oh, you knew Coach Katie or you knew Target. But I was fortunate at young ages, Carol Tateshi, Paul Russo, in grammar school, that were teachers, not coaches. And then those people I mentioned, Dan Marin, and even Greg Geeson, who's like Mike Dibley was at Ross School working, during those critical formative years.
Another guy who talked a lot about Brett, and Faribault is Dave Deneen, one of our best friends.
Man, there's a whole other segment.
Great guy. But Deneen talks about the impression that Faribault and Tavani. Obviously, Tavani was his high school coach, but
Well, and Deneen was another dreamer, right?
like a Delosio.
Sure.
Like
yeah.
Delosio, dreaming big, walked on. San Luis Obispo, I think, earned a scholarship, ended up having a good career
100%.
there.
Loves the game.
I tried to get Deneen a couple of times, as I did Delosio, to come
Yeah.
and be like an academic coach or advisor, and they were smart enough to know that this racket is so volatile that it wasn't appealing. I could never get John Moore to come be an assistant at UCLA St. John's until he was retired.
Until San Diego.
Like Coach Katie, who's retired at Kane.
With Billy McKnight.
St. John's.
Let's give Billy McKnight a shout, too.
Billy McKnight, his sister Kirsten.
Kirsten's a great friend of ours. She was on our podcast.
She's a Hall of Fame coach.
Incredible.
Yeah, no, Billy.
Great family.
Well, that's a great family, exactly. The values, the foundation of the kind of people. And that's an important element. Assistant coaches don't always get the love or the spotlight or the credit. But oftentimes the head coach is more like a CEO and managing. Yeah, you guys know.
That's right, we're assistant coach.
You're more managing that, the operation, the enterprise, with the donors, the boosters, crisis management, problem solving, media. Now with the NIL, the portal, you're like a general manager. And so those assistant coaches, they have to have the right goods in terms of values and virtues and loyalty and all these important traits or attributes, or you're not going to be able to deliver an experience for the kids that you're promising to those parents when they trust you, with coaching their child.
Lav, can't thank you enough. This has been super fun. We can talk to you for many more hours, and I've said it many times, but thanks for everything you've done for me, for all of us. You're an inspiration. You're a beautiful human. We root for you always. Always have.
Coach. Wonderful job.
I've been in many a San Francisco bar over the years and seen you either coach on the sidelines or broadcasting and saying, I know that guy. And you've never changed. You're always there for us, and we just really appreciate you.
Yeah, the feelings are mutual. And what's wonderful about, the time between coaching is it creates a different pace and therefore a different space to connect and spend time with people that you're sometimes not able to. And so these last couple of weeks hanging out with you guys have been terrific. And then the ties, right, that 6 degrees element sounds kind of cliche, but the older you get, the more meaningful that becomes.
Yeah, sure.
And couldn't be happier for the success you've had with this endeavor and enterprise. And I know I speak for so many people because you guys get it, the fabric of Marin and Northern California and basketball. And so it's been a great marriage, like the kind of people you are with this podcast and able to touch and inspire so many, and also allow us to tell stories. Right? Storytelling is such an important aspect of life. And so it's really cool because future generations are going to benefit, from hearing these stories. And for that, I applaud you as well.
We appreciate you, Lav.
Love you guys.
Love you. Thanks, bud.
All right, that was a lot of fun. Great time at the Brazen Head with Coach Lavin. We actually continued there for some time afterwards. We sat down with our friend Dan at the bar, and I had a delicious pork chop, and we had some red wine, and enjoyed a little bit more of the evening. So, not a sponsor, but we did have a lovely evening at the Brazen Head. But now we're back at the Hub, and the Hub is a sponsor, Dave. We're going to do an outro, and like we did with part one of this interview with Coach Lavin, we're going to splice in a clip, a little bit of material from our first interview with him, which, as we mentioned before, was in the team room at Archie Williams Drake. And Steve was sitting, like I would say, right above him at about 9 o'clock. Up above the lockers was a ball signed by John Wooden that he had helped arrange to bring to the team room some years ago. And in this interview, that part two, we get into, as you were just listening to, some compare and contrast with his dad and Coach Wooden. But in our first conversation in the team room, we got even more John Wooden.
So, put a gun to the head of any basketball fan, a knowledgeable basketball fan, and you ask them quickly, who's the greatest coach in the history of basketball? I would say, if we're playing the Family Feud, the top answer would be John Wooden.
With Mark Jackson coming in a close second.
Easy Duff. Right there. Mark Jackson was a great coach. But no, I mean, John Wooden is just an absolute icon of the coaching world. But then beyond coaching, his lessons are so applicable to life. And his books are must reading. And I've had the incredible fortune, as I'm sure you did as well, Duff, back in the Lavin Camp days of meeting him and just being in his presence was, even as a kid, you knew you were around somebody who was special. He signed my Pyramid of Success. I still have it. And Lav had this, just back to the magic carpet ride, this unbelievable opportunity to build a friendship with Coach Wooden. Coach Wooden loved Lavin. Steve would visit him often, even beyond his coaching days, into Coach Wooden's later life. Steve would visit Corey Close, who's the head coach of the UCLA women's team, just won a national title. She talks about how Steve facilitated her meeting Coach Lavin when she first got the UCLA job, and that was just a huge thing for her. So Steve cultivated this relationship, back to his ability with people. And, you know, we could have a whole separate podcast on John Wooden and the lessons learned, but this was a neat little anecdote that Steve gave. It was a couple minutes about the Pyramid of Success, but then also this Andy Hill story is great, and we can comment on it after we hear it, but it's worth listening to.
Yep. Actually, I did not ever meet John Wooden.
Oh, you didn't? You weren't there that year? Too bad.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
It would have been great. Yeah. Now I'm feeling like I really have missed out on a major accomplishment that was there for my taking.
But you know what you did do, Duff? You drove Steve to the bottom of the hill so he could run back up.
That's true. I did drive him way down the hill, drop him off in his car so that he could run roughly 70 miles back to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, take it away. Well, I want to ask if you have a favorite John Wooden quote or aphorism.
I do. The tough part with him was so often, you know, he was paraphrasing others. You know, the Winston Churchill, a life without giving is a life not worth living. His favorite human being was Mother Teresa, because she spent her life dedicated to helping those in need, right? And, you know, but favorite comedian was Bob Newhart, because he was clever and didn't rely on vulgarity. Loved Bob Newhart. Also Abe Lemons, who was a coach that smoked cigars, had a great sense of humor. Got a big kick out of him too. His favorite American was Lincoln.
Another good choice.
And interestingly, he was a big fan of Jimmy Carter because he felt he was such an honest president. And even though he wasn't popular,
Right.
and is often criticized, but he felt his integrity was impeccable and that he was so honest, you know, in a difficult era.
That's
right?
interesting.
Yeah. But I think with him, it was, you know, poetry that he would recite more than one quote, although that was a favorite, his life without giving is a life not worth living. And the Cervantes idea of the journey, right, more than the destination. And his Pyramid of Success was based on that. He was at Dayton High School in Kentucky, later South Bend Central High School in Indiana, before going to Indiana State, where it was a teacher's college in Division II. And then eventually he's in the service, the Navy, and he comes to UCLA. But he was disappointed as a high school English teacher that the grading system was A, B, C, D, F. And so he came up with the Pyramid of Success as a way to better evaluate someone's success based on where they're starting. Do they have the academic preparedness? Do they have the privilege that maybe other students do? And so success is the peace of mind and knowing that you did the best you're capable of. And throughout that pyramid are these core values, right, of industriousness and being a good teammate and, you know, selflessness and attention to detail and enthusiasm and, you know, work ethic. And those things were really more important in terms of traits that will sustain us, those values and virtues, again, which we've touched on today, as opposed to a letter grade.
Right.
That doesn't take into account where someone's starting. Some people are starting
Sure.
That
farther
notion
from
was
the
way
starting.
ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Right?
It was.
Yeah.
To
right?
think of that.
Right.
Yeah, back in the 30s,
Yeah.
1930s.
I still remember Larry Fulton yelling at me, "Be quick, but don't hurry. Be quick, but don't hurry." Over and over again.
I still say it.
And there's a book written by Andy Hill because Coach Wooden and him had a falling out, which is another
podcast someday. And Andy Hill went on to didn't play a lot at UCLA. He was a star player that didn't get off the bench much and resented Coach Wooden, and they didn't talk for decades. And someone on the golf course after Andy swung said, slow down. And it made him think of Coach Wooden's quote, be quick, but don't hurry. Yeah. And it led to him calling Coach Wooden, kind of burying the hatchet.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And said, I thought of you today.
That's cool.
And can we get together? And they got together, worked it out, then wrote a book together. And it's called Be Quick, But Don't Hurry. It's about how, as he got older, he realized why Coach Wooden, like we do often with our parents, with him being now in management at CBS, did Touched by an Angel and a lot of hit shows, and having his own children, he kind of worked through why he resented Coach Wooden and understood that really it was misdirected energy because of his relationship with his father and kind of an authority figure.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had this wonderful run down the home stretch of Coach Wooden's life. And it says a lot about Andy Hill too, the humility and the openness to reach out and circle back. And life is short. And back to that, there's less days in front of us than there are behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. That's great. Good question, Duffy. Okay. Well, that was awesome. Andy Hill was a college player for UCLA, and then, obviously went on to a really successful career in entertainment. He was president of CBS and Channel One News. And then, as Steve mentioned, he wrote a book with Coach Wooden. But the Be Quick, But Don't Hurry, I think that's probably one of in the top 3, I'd say, of the coaching aphorisms I spew out all the time. I said it literally this weekend, be quick, but don't hurry. It's such a apt, wonderful, little succinct way of saying something.
I said it to my son Holden when he was attacking his dinner the other night.
Yes.
One thing before we move on to like our takeaways from part 2, Dave, that just occurred to me that is interesting is that you had John Wooden and then you had Bob Knight. They were legendary coaches, both big influences on Lavin.
Yeah.
But if you were to read the book, and we've talked about this book before, the Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yes.
There's a chapter where John Wooden and Bob Knight are pitted against each other in terms of their philosophies of coaching. Knight as a fixed mindset, Wooden as a growth mindset, as being polar opposites in terms of their approach. And I think having spent this time and listened to Lavin talk about these two coaches, that was actually a fallacy. I mean, they may have been quite different, but it was not black and white like that.
Well, that was, I thought, a great takeaway from our first episode with Lav, talking about Coach Knight, about the flexibility and the malleability of him. You think of him as so rigid that he is the general. He's militaristic, he's exacting, he's demanding. And that's true. But as a result, as we talked about ad nauseum in the first episode, by instilling all that into his players, he gave them this freedom. And he had the knowledge and the IQ and the wherewithal to change his style. Yeah. So I think it's a great point, because they are the two kind of classic contrasts, just in their demeanor, really, right?
I think that's more it.
Coach Wooden is not throwing a chair across the floor at a referee. He's not pulling his hair out. He's serene on the sidelines. He's calm. He's soft-spoken. Coach Knight was not that way.
But he was also not fixed. I mean, he was fixed to some degree, but there were certain aspects of his coaching that were very, very flexible, as you say, Dave.
Yep.
So
yep.
You get a little bit more insight into these two legends of the game.
Okay, so we're going to do, once again, our 4-point play, that elusive play in basketball, where we're going to have, each of us are going to make 2 observations about this segment of our interview with Lav. You're going to go first this time, Duff. So give us a takeaway of what you liked.
Did you ever have a 4-point play, Dave?
No, you have to shoot the ball to get a 4-point play.
That's true.
Sure, I set a screen on a 4-point play.
Okay, yeah. Let's go with, this is kind of an obvious one. Dave and I both pinpointed this one, but he was a gentleman enough, since he got to meet Coach Wooden and I didn't, that he gave this one to me.
You're welcome.
So just talking about the importance as a coach of having the glue guys who have the sense of otherness. And he mentions, of course, Earl Watson and Rico Hines. But we've talked, a lot on this podcast about the importance of the glue guy on the team or glue woman on the team. And it can be really sometimes hard to define exactly what makes them that way, but you kind of know it when you see it. But it's also a little hard to select for. You don't often know you have them until you've given them the opportunity and the role. So I thought that, aspect of the conversation was intelligent and illuminating.
I love the way he used the phrase otherness. I ruminated on that for a while. And he even mentioned it in the context of Baron Davis, who was not a glue guy. Baron Davis was a superstar, but Baron had this otherness, which I would define as just the ability to relate to people, even if they're not exactly like you. And Baron was such a leader that Steve mentioned, they get Baron to go to UCLA, and that leads to several top recruiting classes because Baron's an ambassador for the team, for the school. And the sense of otherness I thought was just great, having not only a high basketball IQ, but a high EQ, ability to relate to people. Really cool. And that's something that obviously Steve Lavin has big time.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. It's mine.
Yeah. No, it's your turn.
This is a more simple segment, but I liked when we were talking about the difference between being a head coach and an assistant coach, and Steve was discussing the differences, and he used the metaphor of flying a jet versus simulator. And as someone who I started as an assistant coach, and for a year I was a head coach, obviously the stakes were much lower than what Steve has experienced. I thought that was a really good way to put it. It does feel like you're flying the jet versus being in the simulator. You're making decisions, not suggestions, all the cliches you want to say, but I thought the way he put that was really great. And I liked how he pointed out, which I remember very well, when he was an assistant coach, he's on the sideline, his hair's slicked back, he's perfect, he's pristine, and then as a head coach, he's drenched in sweat. I mean, he's wearing a white shirt, and it's soaking wet. Just, he said, your vital signs change when you're a head coach, especially at a place like UCLA.
Yeah, I've done mainly assistant coaching in my days, Dave, but I've done some head coaching. I know you've done more than I have, and there is the difference both in the mindset as well as the decisiveness that you have to have, even if you have people around you. It's kind of like, well, I can't sit here and waffle with my decision. I can't just kind of chirp some ideas. You got to do. As Herrick says, the head coaching can be lonely, but it can also require additional antiperspirant.
Exactly. Okay, your next one.
So, on the theme of, I did enjoy as a assistant coach myself, the discussion of empowering assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of operating as a CEO of a program and knowing what your strengths are. And obviously there are certain things you can't delegate, and probably, the game decisions, the key decisions in a game are one of those, but there are many other things you can. So I really enjoyed his discussion of that, in particular, him having to do that because he was thrust into a role at age 32, which was probably not the path that he saw for himself. Maybe he wasn't quite as seasoned as he could have been.
Yeah.
But he was able to figure it out. And, I think that's something that all head coaches should think about is how do the assistants that are underneath me, what are their goals? How can I help them grow, and how can they help me? Have it be symbiotic relationship.
So when we had John Pay on, which was a really fun discussion, and we talked about Walsh. Walsh is an example, Bill Walsh is an example of, you look at the coaches who coached for Bill Walsh, his coaching tree, as they call it.
Right.
And it's a long series of really successful head coaches in the NFL for years and years. And in basketball, there's the same thing. Popovich is one of those guys. Phil Jackson's one of those guys, of people who just build up the people around them, empower them, and they go on to be really successful coaches. And Lav is somebody who values that. When he was an assistant, and he talks about how grateful he was to work for people like Gene Katie and Jim Herrick, who gave him the chance to have a voice. And but again, ultimately, and I mentioned this in the interview. I mean, Lav tells this great story of where he's got this idea, and Herrick's like, "Oh, it's a great idea, Steve. When you're a head coach, you can go ahead and do that." He listened, and it wasn't like he just dismissed it, but he said, "We're not going to do that. because I'm the head coach and I'm making the decision, but thank you for your input.
Right. And that is a perfect reaction, I think, because bringing something to head coach, you want to feel like, the work you put into it or the thought, the observation is valued. You don't want to have it dismissed out of hand, but you also don't expect that every suggestion is going to be adopted. But if you're ignored in that situation, then you might sort of be like, well, I'm probably going to keep the next one to myself.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to take it, to Coach Kerr and see if he likes that idea.
Another interesting aspect here, we actually talked about this more in our first discussion with Steve, so it didn't make it to air, but, when Steve did finally get that battlefield promotion and the head coaching job, his assistant coaches were, Jim Saya and Steve Spencer were two of the coaches on his staff initially. He later brought on Pat Sandel. Those all three guys who are Marin folks who coached at Pirate Camp, coached at Lavin Camp. And so Steve they're all great coaches. They're not there only because they're his friends. They're phenomenal coaches. They've all gone on to long careers as college coaches. But also he had a trust there. And back to that lonely, I think those guys probably helped Steve not feel as lonely when he was a 32-year-old coaching the biggest stage in the college basketball world.
And they also, one of the things about coaching that's a lot of fun, you and I both know, is just whether it's a conversation or, a text chain or going to the bar afterwards, it's just breaking stuff down with people who love the game as much as you do it, and that you feel like you can talk to them openly, without, sort of reservation or judgment. And I can imagine that was a group that was perfect for Steve in that regard.
And an absolute perfect segue into my last takeaway from...
Okay, wait, let me set the scene.
Okay.
Dave has been passed the ball in the wing. He's pump faked.
I'm actually going to shoot? No.
The defender has jumped through.
Okay.
He has kind of hop-stepped to his left. Another defender is coming at him.
Way too athletic already. You're assuming way too much athleticism for me,
And
but go ahead.
Coach Honeck is yelling at him,
No.
shoot, because there only are 2 seconds left on the clock. And if he doesn't shoot the ball, the game's over. And Branson is down by 3. Dave shoots, swish, foul. He's going to the line and 1. All right, 4-point play. Can you do it?
How did you know what my dreams were like in high school? Okay, so you're talking about sitting around talking hoop with coaches, and that's one of the fun. So back to, we'll beat this drum one more time, Lavin Camp. Formative years for me, and I know a lot of people listening to this are nodding their head. When Lav talked about Lavin Camp as a, quote, think tank, I thought that was a great way to put it. And it just still amazes me. I'm still trying to rack my brain on all the coaches who went through that camp. And the thing I loved about it, we mentioned it briefly, but they had these chalk talks. So when the kids went to sleep in the dorms and the coaches would get together, and you'd have NBA coaches, literally NBA. Picture being in a classroom at Drake right now, walking in the classroom at Drake with 10 other people, and Steve Kerr walks in and says, okay, what do you guys want to know? That's what it was like. Yeah. And I had Tim Gergovich there, who was Tarkanian's assistant at UNLV when they won the title with Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon in that team, and then went on to be a 25-year NBA assistant coach with George Karl and won a title, I think, with the Mavericks. I mean, and he's just like, all right, what do you guys want to know about the NBA game? And so coaches would ask him, we'd ask him about, how do you play matchups? How do you deal with egos? How do you deal with timeouts? I mean, whatever you want to ask. And he was there and he was listening and looking you in the eye, and he was sitting 5 feet away from you. Randy Funds did that. He was a Lakers assistant coach for Pat Riley for years, was later the GM of the Heat.
Randy Trust Fund, yeah.
Exactly. He was at Lavin Camp. I mean, literally in the room with us with 10 other guys. So just incredible. Multiple NBA coaches. I talked about Mike Budenholzer. We talked about Bob Myers. Sean Farnham, who, if you turn on ESPN during the college basketball season, he's an analyst and a reporter for ESPN. He was a player for the Lavin Camps and a coach. He's a great guy. He ended up walking on at UCLA and playing for Lav. So Lavin Camp is a think tank. Thad Matta, Ohio State, Butler, Xavier, many years as a head coach, coached Lavin Camp. It was just an amazing thing. It was ahead of its time, and Steve and his family should be really proud of what they built there. And I know a lot of us who are listening to this took part in that, and it was a formative experience for us.
Yeah, this goes back to, I'm going to sort of paraphrase something, but like a motivational speaker once said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And so you have all these motivated, smart basketball people, and they all helped spawn, the growth of the basketball intellect of each other. And, it's no surprise then if they're spending all this time together that they all are bolstered by it. So, if you really want to do something, that is a good lesson. Go and spend, a bunch of time with the people who are doing it well, or bunch of people who really want to do it well and need to learn together.
It's also a testament to Steve and the relationships he built with these coaches. I mean, I remember when Gene Katie walked into that gym. Now, again, we talked about this. Angwin is, so you go to St. Helena, so go north of Napa, go to St. Helena, turn right, go up the mountain for about 20 minutes. You're in the middle of nowhere, and that's Angwin. And Gene Katie came from, wherever he was, whatever golf course he was on in the off season, flew out here, drove all that way to come up and speak to our camp. I remember thinking, man, that guy likes Steve a lot. And it was amazing. And a lot of people did that. And that's a testament to Steve and the relationships he's built in this sport.
Absolutely. Well, all right. Well, you completed the 4-point play. Congratulations.
Thank you. Did I make the free throw?
I think actually there was 1 second left on the clock and they hit a buzzer beater. You lost. But, anyway, you did your part.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And so did Coach Lavin. Great job with the interview, all parts of it, Dave. And thank you to our listeners and our sponsors again for the support here in Season 3. And one more pitch for sponsors for Season 4 coming this fall. Please reach out if you're interested. And this continues to be a lot of fun. We continue to find different ways to talk about the wonderful sport of basketball. And enjoy your summer, everyone. Get out there and play some hoops.
And Duff, thank you for your editing, your wizardry, your leadership of this little ship, this little dinghy that is the Run TMC podcast as we bravely set sail. You're doing great. And thanks to all of our guests in Season 3. One cool takeaway from Season 3, the round table became a thing. We're going to keep doing that. That was a lot of fun to get good leverage on our guests. Right?
Yeah. While we're talking about Season 4, if you're a listener, let us know what you like. Do you like the round tables? Do you like when we go a little bit off of basketball, like with
Marin lately?
Do you like the really deep Marin-centric episodes? Like, we kind of throw stuff around and we have fun doing it. But if there's something you like, let us know.
Should we stop doing our NCS and NorCal breakdowns?
I think, the numbers would suggest people love those.
People like those, yeah. I guess.
Right. We're going to be close to 40,000 downloads, Dave, by the time this season wraps up. So we want to thank everyone who's been downloading and listening.
Couldn't do it without you guys. And once again, thank you, Steve, for joining us for all these hours. It was so fun. We appreciate you. And everybody, enjoy the episode and have a wonderful off season. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk at you soon.
Burke's on his feet. He looks up and gives me a grin and says, "Hey, dude, you too must be from Marin." Marin County's A-OK, from Tampa, Stinson, all the way to MA. Fresh organic veggies in the market every